Yes.
All right. So we've talked a lot, or you've read a lot about effective leaders and, what qualities make effective leaders. Why are they effective? And I think when you talk about effective, you also talk about the ineffective. Talk about the leaders that maybe made you realize, I don't want to be like them. I don't want to do that. So does anybody have a good example or somebody that they feel is, or maybe somebody in the past that you've worked with, had the pleasure of being around, that really was an effective leader, and why they were effective?
Well, I've worked with the same principal for, this is my 8th year with her, and which is unusual in my county for a principal to stay at one school.
Yes.
And I think that what makes her most effective is her delegation, and she finds people that can fill in gaps where she might be weak, and she's always done a great job of allowing others to have somewhat of her power in decision making, not to overstep her, but just she capitalizes on other people's strengths.
Who is she delegating to? Is it to other administrators, to teachers, or anybody?
She's mostly, she chooses the teachers that are the most effective in instruction, and she's delegated to them after so many years of kind of proving themselves in the classroom. And one thing this year, she allowed me to get out of the classroom and to become a curriculum facilitator. So that's kind of a big step for me that she's allowed.
So have you seen her delegate something to someone that you thought, why did she do that? They're not going to get that done.
Yes.
How did that work? Did it surprise you, or did they really not get it done?
I've seen both. I've seen where a few years ago she made somebody a grade level chairperson, and I kind of knew it was gonna flop just from my personal association with her. But my principal stuck with it, and she does a great job of trying to develop teacher leaders. And sometimes she hits it on the head, and sometimes she misses. But usually, when it doesn't work, she has kind of a backup plan.
So delegation is one of those characteristics that for any leader, it can be a very difficult thing to do. Most of I always say most educators are type A personalities. They may not be outside of their classroom or outside of the building, but within the building, they can be type A, I want to be in charge type individuals. And delegating some people feel that delegation can be a sign of weakness, sort of like, I can't do this all on my own, so I need your help. And sometimes too, there's some vulnerability to delegating, because you're basically saying, here, I trust you to do this. And there are a lot of teacher leaders or assistant principals that sometimes think, well, I'm going to do it the way that principal would have done it. And delegation isn't being a mini-me. Delegation is, hey, put your own spin on it. And I will say that I always continue to try to delegate more and more. Now, some people on the outside will look at a leader delegating and will say, well, they just don't want to do the work. And some teachers or school employees or even assistant principals think, well, they just don't feel like doing their job, and see it as a sign of weakness. And I definitely don't see that. I kind of say everybody has a job in this building for a reason. If I could run the buses and do all the maintenance and do all the discipline, then I wouldn't need a business manager and 4 assistant principals. So you have to be able to relinquish a lot of those responsibilities. Also, you have to grow your other administrators and your teacher leaders. Teacher leaders are probably the ones that have the most knowledge out there as to what might be good and effective. In fact, today we needed to make a decision, and I just was texting one of my teacher leaders and have said, I'm not going to tell people that you are communicating with me in this type of in this way. You have to kind of protect some of your teacher leaders, but sometimes you forget the impact that it makes on the classroom, or you don't think about, well, have you thought about this, or have you thought about that? So, delegation is one of those that really is just very necessary to be an effective leader. Has anybody known a leader who would not delegate at all? No, that's good. I've seen some leaders absolutely drive themselves either into the hospital or into the loony bin or out of a job because they would not delegate. There are these, I call them derogatory terms toward leaders, micromanagers. And sometimes people get the title of micromanager when really it's, you got to have your thumb on all different aspects of things. So, sometimes people think micromanaging is because you have structures in place. So I always call that, a 4-letter bad word. But delegation is key. You can't do it all on your own. Sometimes you delegate things and with the idea that it's not going to get done. You also have to delegate with the idea it's not going to get done the way in your mind as the leader you want it to be done or you think it should be done. Yet, I sometimes learn more from my teacher leaders and from the assistant principals that I've had the pleasure to work with than I have learned from anybody else. So don't shy away from delegation. I definitely think delegation is a fantastic characteristic for an effective leader. So what other characteristics have you seen some effective leaders have that you've worked with or currently work with?
I would say, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I would say consistency. And it's just like when a teacher makes a lesson plan and they know exactly what they plan to do before they go in. And you can always tell the ones that kind of are winging it. So I think you can see that same thing with administrators, that they really don't know. So they'll go to this person and that person and they'll change based on, oh, okay, I changed my mind, or oh, this is not working. They don't let it, play through, or they don't let the mistakes happen. They're consistent with their rules and expectations and what they want to see in classrooms and what they expect students to do. They're not letting some teachers get by with some things and other teachers not get by with some things. Just consistent in their expectations of their staff and their students.
It's funny that you talked about consistency and talking about lesson plans and comparing that, because you're right. When you go into a classroom, you can tell when a teacher's winging it. You can also tell when the teacher has threatened the kids, hey, you better, let this observation go great. Because they're just not natural. They're just not natural acting. Consistency is something that it's always interesting to hear that, because absolutely, I agree. You've got to be consistent. What is difficult sometimes when you are a school leader is so your staff may not see you, may think you're being inconsistent, like, hey, you didn't hold that person accountable for this. They didn't show up to their lunch duty or their bus duty. What they don't necessarily see may be the backside conversations that you may be having. There's a very short book that is well worth the read. It's like 90 pages. It's called Shifting the Monkey. And it talks about consistency and not shifting the monkey off the back of the lazy employee or the employee that isn't going to give it their all or do it well, and put it on the back of the employee that works really hard. You know, those people that do it all, work really hard, make sure that they do it. And this book talks about, don't shift that monkey, because all you're doing is burning out your good employees. That consistency also for students, you know, everybody wants to see that you're holding everybody accountable as a leader. What they don't want is they don't want an email or communication to go out and have it say, I need everybody at their lunch duty or at their bus duty, when in actuality, it's only 1 or 2 people that didn't show up. Because all the good people, the ones that are really conscientious, the ones that are, you know, I'm not the bad person, I maybe forgot every now and then, they are going to beat themselves up and think, did I miss something? Did I forget to do this? Did I not do that? While the person who never does anything's like, wasn't talking to me, or maybe they were, I really don't care. And that's a culture killer. What consistency can also be that little funny spot of fair versus equal.
Yeah.
You know, you can't always be equal, and sometimes you have to be fair, but sometimes you need to be equal. The school where I worked previously as principal, there were a lot of teachers who just would make doctor's appointments whenever they wanted. Now, granted, I think the teaching profession is one of the most difficult to actually go make a doctor's appointment, because most doctors work the same time you're in school.
Yeah.
And so I think that's very difficult. But they would just, if the doctors said, okay, you can, you know, come in at 9 o'clock. It didn't matter if it was their planning. They just would say, okay, I'm going to go at 9 o'clock, and would disperse their students or have somebody cover, and would not give any thought to, well, tomorrow there's a work day, so why don't you go to the doctor then? And so we had to start putting some expectations in place so that we actually had the teachers there. And having that consistency, and then all of a sudden, the teacher that never misses came and said, look, I really need to have this doctor's appointment, and this was the only time that they had. And you start to think, gosh, I have to be consistent, I have to be equal. You know, everybody needs to not think about that. Needs to think about when their planning is, or when the next work day is, or something along those lines. And then all of a sudden, you have to think, wait a minute, this person never misses. This person never asks to leave. This person never goes anywhere during the school day. And so that's that fair versus equal. You know, it's very unfair to punish somebody who just doesn't ever abuse it. So that is a constant conversation. The other thing about consistency is also having a consistent, common message. I have 4 assistant principals, so there's 5 of us. And about 2 weeks ago, we realized that none of us were consistent in the message on how to document a redirect in our discipline tracking system. That it was all over the board. And if the 5 of us are not on the same page, then how do we expect the rest of the staff to be on the same page? And I have over 100 staff members. So we also had to have a conversation amongst the 5 of us about what exactly does the rule no outside food mean? Because we were all implementing it in a very inconsistent manner. And so having those constant conversations, having those constant check-ins with each other, because we've said if the 5 of us give 5 different answers, how do we expect the 100+ staff members to be able to give, how do we expect them to be able to follow the same message, the same rule, the same expectation? So consistency is a huge can of worms that is very essential. You know, you want to have a common message to your parents about consistency. I have a friend who works in Charlotte-Mecklenburg in a middle school and is a part of a special program, and I won't I'll try to keep the school a little confidential, but the principal decided the end of last week to all of a sudden change what the retest policy is for math in this special program, but not for English. Then had a parent night for the special program, and the English teacher, who was my friend, was bombarded with parents. Why isn't your reteach policy the same as the math? She was like, it is. The principal had not communicated with everybody that was a part of that special program, had only communicated with the math teachers. And so my friend calls me Thursday night just angry, like I was made a fool of to my parents because I sat there and said, it is the same policy, and come to find out it isn't. And it was because of lack of communication. And you have to have consistent communication throughout as well. And so consistency, even though it is a, 11 letter word, it is huge. It is huge in a whole lot of areas. Just like you need to be consistent with your students in the classroom, you need to be consistent with the teachers, you need to be consistent with your parents, you need to be consistent with your message. And that is a very huge, difficult, essential characteristic. The administrators or the leaders that I've seen that have really struggled they've struggled with that consistency. They've struggled with constantly doing a check-in to make sure that people are on the same page and consistent with the message and with the ideas that are going on in that building. So, just like in a classroom, you set out as a leader, hey, here's what the expectations are, here's what we're going to do about it. You then have to continue to check in and have those conversations. So, it's an ongoing, it's ongoing. So absolutely, consistency is huge. It's huge. What other characteristics have you guys seen out of effective leaders?
Commitment.
Commitment. What do you mean by commitment?
Whatever you expect of your staff, you have to be willing to do that as well.
You have to show them that you're willing to go in the trenches with them.
Right.
Absolutely. You really shouldn't ask your staff as a leader or anybody else that's with you, you shouldn't ask them to do something you're not willing to do. And that's difficult. When you're sitting not in a classroom and you're talking about giving assessments or holding students accountable for being in class on time, when you're talking about dress code for the faculty, then you as the leader also need to model that and to be there with them. I think that commitment and that consistency really go hand in hand. If I ask my teachers to sit through 5 hours of an advisory just because we have to give the ACT, I have to think about what would I do if I were with 20 seniors that it's February, they could care less. In their minds, they're already grown adults. To sit in an advisory for 5 hours when I don't teach them in class. So we, as the leader, you come up with activities for them to do or ideas to give them. Maybe school-wide, maybe you rely on your counselors to go in and work with them on their college applications, their college planning, making sure, transcript reviews, anything. You have to show your staff that you are willing to put in as much of an effort as possible. I've had the misfortune to work with a colleague who is never at work. I'm sorry, I don't know how you're an administrator when you're never at work. If you were in a business, you might be able to run your business being at home, talk to your clients, interact with them. I don't know, I've never worked in a business, but I can't imagine being a school administrator and never being in my building, never interacting, never walking the halls, never communicating with the students. And so when I see some school administrators that are never there, it just kind of makes you wonder, how do you do that? And that commitment, sometimes that commitment is also to your staff to help them. You know, if there's a difficult student, that commitment is to them. I'm going to help you walk through the trenches with this kid that makes your life and my life miserable. And how are we going to put in interventions? How are we going to work with this child? I think sometimes that commitment also is handling a very difficult parent and not making the teacher consistently be beaten up by that parent. And you guys all probably had 1 or 12 parents pop into your head. You know, those parents that just are so demanding and condescending, and you just think, I wouldn't even talk to my worst enemy this way. Sometimes that commitment is stepping in and helping with that difficult parent so that the teacher does not have to undergo that abuse. I always say, if I become like protective mama, if somebody is really ugly to the front office, I will have a bigger issue with them being ugly to the people in the front office than maybe I will with what the main disgruntled topic is. Like, don't you treat those people that barely make minimum wage that way. And I become very protective of them. And I become protective of the teachers. And, you know, sometimes parents see position power. Sometimes kids see position power. Sometimes other faculty see position power. But that doesn't mean, because I have principle behind my name, that you should treat me nicely and be rude to everybody else. And so many a times I have to have that difficult conversation with a parent, and it really has nothing to do with their kid or anything else. It has to do with how that parent is acting. I think about, like, on athletic events, if a parent is not being a good representative for the school, having that difficult conversation. And to me, that is a part of commitment too. Can you guys think of some other ways that commitment can be shown from a school leader?
Yes, hello. For administrators to not react and believe the first thing they hear, but check it out for themselves, to make sure the information they receive is accurate. I've seen some, they'll react without checking out, and then it might not be the truth to it.
Absolutely. Doesn't that just tick you off sometimes?
Yes.
You know, I have to explain a lot of times to teachers, hey, I have to investigate this. Just like if somebody came and said that a child had you know, something inappropriate on campus, I have to look into it. So if a parent comes and says, you know, Miss Smith did not give my child that test, or Miss Smith lost my child's, you know, assignment, you have to look into it. But it's not because I am trusting the parent. I actually had a conversation with one of my administrators. We were talking about how there are a few teachers who are not happy with me right now. And this assistant principal came to me and said, I just want to make you aware of kind of what they're saying, what they're feeling. And I said, all right, appreciate that. What the teacher doesn't realize is, yeah, when I called her in and talked to her about some statements that were made by several students, and I had human resources sitting there, it wasn't because I was there to bust her. It was there because I was trying to protect her backside. And that, you know, the statements and the alleged misconduct had already made it to human resources before it landed on my desk. You know, when I had to put a squash to some unethical practices, especially dealing with money and overseeing those practices and putting some checks and balances in place, instead of, the teacher felt that I was mistrusting them, when really I was trying to save them from accusations of somebody saying, hey, they're trying to get their Christmas money because they're not receipting things appropriately or, handling things appropriately. So, I need to do a better job in those situations. And I appreciated my assistant principal coming and telling me that, because the teacher feels that I was out to get them. And then I put these policies and procedures in place to harm them, when really I was doing it so that somebody doesn't come and accuse them of something that you can't go back from without a long, drawn-out investigation. So, believing and supporting, absolutely. As an administrator, you have to follow through and investigate. You have to look into those things. And it will happen to you.
Yes.
As a school administrator, you'll have your boss or the superintendent or whoever is over administrators come and sit down in your office and say, hey, I need to see the policy that you sent home or the student handbook for cell phones. That happened about 3 weeks ago to me. And I handed it to my boss and she said, well, this isn't what was told to me. You're right. So I think sometimes too, it's definitely investigating, but it's also how you have to make sure that you communicate it appropriately to the employee, that I'm not here accusing you. I am here investigating to support you.
I agree.
Yeah.
And one other thing I will bring up too is have administrators that don't call staff out over the intercom in front of the whole school instead of addressing that employee. I think
So if I am correct, an example might be, Ms. Smith, you need to report to your front drive duty.
No, I'm gonna give another one.
Okay.
Like they don't call this person name, just like math teacher or don't teach social studies or something in the classroom. Anyway, everybody knows who the person they referring, that making us know who they referring to without calling their name. That's what I'm saying. They got that indirectly. I think those conversations you have, at the office if they.
Absolutely. A personal
whispering who they talking about, who was the teacher, stuff like that.
Well, and then you have those that are going, am I the teacher? Was I the one? And typically the teacher that was doing the wrong was really not, they don't really care most of the time. They don't even realize they were talking about them.
Yeah.
I mean, you're exactly right. In North Carolina, we have that teacher working condition survey. Well, one of the things that is always low, and no matter what school I've looked at, what school I've worked, no matter any of that, the things that are low are teachers feeling supportive, administrators being visible, administrators being consistent, especially when it comes to student discipline. Those always seem to be the lowest when it comes to the teacher working condition survey or a school climate survey.
Right.
So just be prepared for that, because sometimes it's like, I'm here, I can't deal with your discipline if I'm out being visible. It's a catch-22. So, if you are going to be an administrator in North Carolina, just be prepared for it. Sometimes you can't necessarily beat yourself up, because I once had on a survey of me that I was very positive, was I was very responsive to emails, communication, even when I was not like in the office. And another one was I always had my phone responding to emails, and the person wanted more of like eye contact. Well, those are both great perspectives, but how do I continue to be responsive yet give eye contact? So what I did is when people would come up and talk to me, I would say, hold on a minute, let me finish sending this email. And then I would put my phone to the side or in my pocket and would look them face to face and say, hey, how can I help you? So that they know, hey, I'm trying to be responsive to somebody, but also I'm going to give you that attention. I always say perception is reality.
It is. Yes, it is.
Any other characteristic of an effective leader that you've seen?
I'm gonna just say it again. It's my might have said it before I got here. Showing the staff that they appreciate the staff and they'll work for it. They'll go back to back. They'll help if they know you're appreciative and don't mind, them helping, putting out the effort, as long as they feel supported, like you were saying before.
Yeah, absolutely. Showing appreciation. I'm not going to lie to you. We are about to get into knowing yourself and knowing your strengths and weaknesses. That is one of my weaknesses. So I actually have sitting on my coffee table over there cards that I'm going to write to staff who have turned things in to me, like when I need to, like the beginning of the year stuff, when they turn it into me in alphabetical order. You don't know how far that goes, so I need to write a note. Thank you so much for turning those in alphabetical order. Something small like that means a ton to me, but I need to show that appreciation to them.
Yeah, my first principal, she was like that. She wrote little personal note, and everybody just appreciate even just leaving something in the mailbox, and they will really work for and appreciate that out of her.
And also,
I worked with an assistant principal, and I stole it from her, where she came up with like monthly treats that you put in the teacher's mailbox. It was something really cute, Pinteresty type something. So Friday, I was putting highlighters in there saying, you're the highlight of our staff. Thanks for, which buying 150 of those once a month, like next month is either Reese's cups or M&Ms. And I just spent like $800 at Sam's buying a bunch of stuff for the monthly treats, that says you're, magnificent and marvelous for the M&Ms. And have we recently told you how much we appreciate you? Pinterest has all of that stuff.
right. Also, just using basic things like shout out over the PA system. And what we do is, my principal, we have what we call our newsletter, Bulldog Bob, that she sends out every Sunday. And when a teacher does something great, she'll mention it in the Bulldog Bob, everyone. So it's cost effective. In other words, it doesn't cost us.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't allow jeans in my building when students are there. So when the teachers earn a jeans pass, it's like I paid them $1 million. Or if I say, hey, we've worked really hard this week, everybody can wear jeans on Friday as long as you wear, your green and white. Oh my gosh, you would have thought I would have given them a week off and a cruise to the Caribbean. and that cost me nothing. It cost them. They have to go buy the jeans. So small things go a long way in showing that appreciation. It also matters to the students. My band went to a competition this weekend and they got first in the music part. So in the morning, I'm going to put on the sign, congratulations to the band for getting first in music this weekend. That just means a ton to them, and it means a lot to the kids. So remember all of this as you are venturing into an administrative role or leadership role or are currently in a leadership role. For all of those people that have helped with your tasks, make sure you tell them thank you, because you've had to rely on them a lot, especially in your building. Make sure that especially if you're in a leadership role, make sure that you try to work on that delegation. That can be a lot. And I've even found, especially working in a high school and even in a middle school, and I would even say in an elementary school, depending on what grade, you can delegate some things to a student. Hey, will you go change the date, on the calendar? And that means a lot to the kids. You can put them in charge of some things. So don't forget your students in that, because you can delegate to them. And even in an administrative role, you can delegate.
Yeah, just like administrator, they got me do announcements in the morning, switch places, and she watched my class for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my president of my student body does the announcements. And, there's some vulnerability to handing over a student the intercom. And actually, the third day of school, we actually impeached the president of our student body because he did something that was not acceptable and lost our trust. And I said to him, I'm not going to hand over the intercom to you if I can't trust that you're going to paint your parking spot with something appropriate.
Wow.
So, no matter who you delegate to, there's a lot of trust that's given.
Right.
And you have to remember, if they don't do it the way that you would have done it, as long as they still get the end result, that's all that matters. And that's where I think some administrators or leaders get the term of a micromanager. I don't want you to do it like me, but at the end, this is what needs to be done. This is what the end result needs to be.
So would it be appropriate to have a script? I know we don't want them to do it like us. Like I have, I'm middle school, so of course I just delegated the commitment. Well, I just delegated that assignment of one of the announcements to students, our 7th and 8th graders. So I gave them a script.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think that is great, and then you could maybe pull back from that script.
okay.
What I do when I delegate to an administrator, an assistant principal, or a teacher leader something, we talk about what is the end result.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what from point A to point Z, what should point Z look like? But I don't fill in how to get there, because then that would be them doing it like me.
Okay.
You know, I told one of my assistant principals, we need to have for the year every bell schedule that we might need to have. And he said, well, we have them. Well, yes, we do. But a one-stop shop, one document bell schedule.
Yeah, less than 1 minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
If we need to talk some more, we can go on to the next Zoom session. If you guys are good, I'm good. Just remember that we will not be having one next Sunday. Okay?
Okay.
Anybody want to move on? Are we good? Thumbs up if you're good. Thumbs down if you want to move on.
I'm good.
Good.
Good. All right. Have a good week. Have a good 2 weeks.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.